Welcome to the Female VC Lab podcast. I have Edith here in one line. Give me your name, your title, and the name of
Yeah,
your fund.
my name is Edith Yeung. I'm the general partner at Raise Capital.
Wonderful. So tell me a little bit what inspired you to become a venture capitalist.
Barbara, it's going to sound really weird, but actually no one really asked me why before. And I really thought hard about this. But
No one's asked you why.
Yeah, and so I want to share with two story and what really triggered me. I really thought hard about this one, but I'm not necessarily trying to tell you my whole life story per se, but I actually was trained as a classical pianist.
Oh, wow.
Starting
That's
when I
cool.
was six years old. And for a long time, like when I was trained to be a pianist, I really don't understand why I had to sit there for hours and hours until much later on in life. So I studied like a total of about 12 years. When I got to 16, I finally get a chance to play with other people. And then when I moved to I'm originally from Hong Kong. When I moved to the US, my high school actually have a show choir. So I was actually playing like Elton John with my show choir, like dancing and playing. And I finally understand like the magic of being like part of something where you study so long, you're really good at one thing. When everything comes together, it's just magical. But later on, I realized, it's going to sound horrible, but I realized I wasn't really good enough as a concert pianist. And so when I went to university.
Well, that's okay. You had the epiphany, right? You had it early.
Yeah, actually, when I was like 12, 13, I realized I wasn't good enough. My cousin became a professional violinist.
Oh, wow.
But beside the point, I went to college, I studied engineering, and I went to Purdue. And then when I first started working, this is like Web 1 many years ago, what I was doing all day long was fixing bugs. And I was pretty good at what I was doing. And then later on, I was like a DBA. And I thought, wow, this is so boring.
That is boring. I agree.
And I didn't understand like the big picture of being a good engineer, how it fit into everything, until much later on, I started working at like Siebel, Oracle, working with different customers. I worked at Autodesk, and I really got to see, wow, I'm doing very specific things, really deep. But what really satisfied and really get me excited is that seeing the big picture of it. And I bring these two things up because I think venture capital actually forced us, like you, Barbara, and myself, at Raise, where we actually have to think about the big picture from day one, all the time. The minute it's not only about the know-how being an engineer or a founder really good at one thing, but how like this one thing and like the band, the orchestra that they put together fit in to the big picture of the world. And I love it. And even though I think being trained as a pianist or engineer get me to at least get a better sense of, okay, is this founder or engineer bullshitting me or not?
Correct, but that's a benefit.
But the part that it really get me excited is, wow, like I can get to see the big picture on a daily basis. And that's something that really get me up at night and like excited to get out of bed, because this is something that is just so fun to do every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree. You always have to be looking at the big picture strategically all the time.
Yep.
And that is fun, because you can have some interesting thinking.
Yeah, and then we force a particular, Barbara, you also focus on early stage.
Yes.
In many cases, the shapes of form, it's not even form, is you basically look at this like egg, it's not even hedge. But there's so much imagination that we can foresee, and the vision that the founder is trying to do. And we are just part of their journey is just so amazing.
Yeah, and it's an honor to have founders that want you to be a part of their journey. That's an honor to me.
Yep, absolutely.
So what is your investment thesis and the motivation behind your thesis?
Yeah, so our Raise Capital, for us, we focus on seed, pre-seed, all things infrastructure software. Means our founders, their customers are mostly engineers. Have a lot to do with my background. Actually, before Raise Capital, I was at 500 startups. I was a solo GP, and during my time at 500, I got the chance to invest in a company called Solana in January 2018.
Oh, okay.
Really thankful. And then I look back, some of my best investments are actually all developer focused, developers tools, the things that The way that I see Solana is the Amazon Web Services for Web3. So
Yes.
we're seeing a lot of the platforms and tools that still need to be built for Web3.
100%.
But for us, it's not only what Web3 or Web2, I think just in general, the world on the fundamental like fabric of the internet, regardless is security or data or machine learning or communication, there's just so much more need to be built in. We're super excited about it.
100%. We look at that on the quantum computer side as well. What are the tool sets that are going to need to be built to enable and empower all?
That's right.
Because if you don't have that, then you're back to the kind of command line typical developer. It's exclusionary at some levels, because how then do you go about building on these things? And you have to have all these specialized skill sets. And if you, the other thing I look at from a kind of strategic or trend side is if you look at all these low code, no code, minimal code tools that are creating these massive businesses, you have to look at that and say, what really is unique that needs to be built? And it is that tooling.
That's right. And I actually think that the tooling I actually started my career in Web 1, and Web 1 and Web 1 is all about like information economy, right? So Web 2 is all about like social interactive platform companies. And Web 3 for us, I'm like mind-boggling. It's just crazy for me to think about where now the participant, the user also own a piece.
That's powerful.
That's very powerful.
That's supposed to be the promise of crypto at some levels. You are your own bank, but that's now right. You can own your own whatever it is at this point. I think taking back your data, like taking back the data, it ends up creating a different kind of virtualized ownership now.
Yep, totally. And I think that it's just so magical to think about and it's definitely infiltrating like all kind, from you being in LA, Hollywood, on people super excited about like the music, media, and or from finance point of view for all kinds. But I really think that Web3 is so much more than just crazy crypto and token prices. There's just
I agree. The way I look at Web3, I look at it as user interface. How are you now going to interact? And it's no longer going to be like a flat web page where we go to a URL and it's just going to be like, here's this flat web page and we have maybe some kind of cool little gifts on here. It's going to completely change that.
Yeah.
Because if everyone could have a Decentraland or a Sandbox or a Roblox or what's the other one? Minecraft, right? Like you've created your own little world and everybody can do that. That's powerful.
Yeah, it's super exciting. But yeah, so sometimes we call ourselves, we like to invest in plumber because of the plumbing of things.
Yes.
And I guess I was trained as a plumber, pianist, and engineer, and now we're investing in plumbing.
As am I. I was trained as a plumber. I wrote many things that were modems, things were a lot of kernel level, a lot of infrastructure on a lot of these machines that didn't exist. And so I believe in the plumbing and tooling infrastructure as well.
Yep.
Because like you said, there's still a lot to be built.
Yep.
There's still a lot to be built, and there's still a lot of room for many people to participate in that way.
Yeah, we were super excited about it. I'm glad we're on the same boat.
Absolutely. So what are you currently learning or listening to or reading these days?
So it's going to sound funny. I actually should have known about this. First off, now we need to listen to your
Female
podcast.
VC Lab podcast. Thank you so much, Edith. Yes, absolutely.
I've been getting into the whole streak of listening to more podcasts lately. So in addition to your podcast, as well as the Acquire podcast, I learned so much listening to Ben and David. In particular, just finished listening to this older story that they did on TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor. And it was, I think, a two-part series talking about Morris Chang, the founder of TSMC. I just super inspired. And yeah, I didn't realize that this one of the biggest company in the world was actually seeded by the government fund, which is quite surprising. And it's just so fascinating to hear, which is somebody who started his company in his 50s and then actually wanted to retire, but then came back out in his 70s because he really wanted to get the deal done supporting Apple iPhone. I just think it's so fascinating, and entrepreneurship spirit is definitely ageless. And if you 100%. Really believe in something, then you make it happen. And I thought it was just one of the most inspiring story I heard lately, and I really love that.
That's wonderful. So bonus question, everyone gets it. Everyone knows what it is now. It used to be a surprise. But in 2 years, how do you see venture capital or investing changing or evolving?
A few things. I think but the way that I actually see myself, and not only really a investor, but also a fund manager.
Yeah.
And as a fund manager, the way of things that we need to learn is so much more than venture capital before.
There's a lot to learn now.
Yeah.
Jeez, a
And
lot to
and
learn.
and have a lot to do with not just like the art of investing. I actually wrote an article that talks about the difference between Web2 and Web3 investing. Obviously, the Web3 part has a lot to do with the token side of things, which the token
That's a
economics,
small part of it,
yeah, token economics,
potentially, because it could be just a metaverse,
that's
which
right.
may or may not have a token.
Yeah, and you don't need a token to be a Web3
No,
company, by the
no,
way.
you don't.
And but I do think that the token side is here. The token part of investing is here to stay. So
Yes,
that will continue to grow that pie. And meanwhile, I think 2, 3 years from now, a lot of the exit, I think being a fund manager is not only the art of investing, but the art of exit and liquidity, to think about that part as well. Where,
I'm glad you brought that up, Edith. I think
yeah,
about that all the time. How
yep,
do you get up the return?
yep,
And
yep.
I say this, I noticed you mentioned you did Solana, so you've invested in some crypto companies. But I said when the United States figures this out, then people like you and me we'll be able to make a lot of liquidity events.
Yeah.
Because we have some fundamental understandings that some other people don't, right? And that gains us an advantage in that way.
Yeah, and in some sense, I think hopefully 2 years, 2, 3 years from now, a lot of the regulatory compliance will all sort itself out. And
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, they're going through it now. I think it's a part of the journey being in the US. There's going to be some knife fight, and things is going to slowly clear up, and there's going to some crash. And I think it's just part of the journey. So
I agree.
hopefully 2 or 3 years from now, a lot of these things will be more clear up, and it's not as scary as everybody say or the media portray it as. And it's a growing industry, and I'm super excited about it.
That's great. That's great. So how do people contact you?
I'm super easy to find. You can follow me on Twitter, Edith Yeung, EDITHYEUNG on Twitter. Or the easiest, even better way is a really Web1 way. It's just email me, which is edith@raise.capital. Look forward to learning more.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Edith Yeung from Race Capital, for being my guest on the Female VC Lab podcast.
Thank you, Barbara.